Just continuing now to do the outline of his costume there, just around his shoulders and the other shoulder. Still with the Hunt 102 Coracle. You can see I'm just sort of slightly going a bit further out with his chest, just to sort of give it a bit more form, sort of barreling out. It's looking a little flat at the pencils that I put down. Now I'm just putting in the circle around his X symbol there on his chest. Again, not using a template or a ruler or anything. I hate using rulers when I'm drawing, so as much as possible I sort of freehand them in. But if it's a long line that needs to be straight, or if it's an important circle, or you've got a lot of circles sort of close together, you really sort of need to use a ruler or a template or a compass or something of that nature, speed bow, just to make sure you've got the lines correct. And Colossus actually has a lot of piping here on his costume, so I was just referencing there. Not all the lines that I've drawn here have the piping, so I'm just making sure I've got the right lines, so drawing the right piping on here, because I'm not too familiar with his new costume that I'm actually rendering here. Just getting all the details on his legs. And doing his knees here. He's sort of got this piping around the knee cap area. So that this line at the bottom there on his abdomen doesn't have the piping, it's just got the line, same underneath his knee, just there. That's what I was checking for before. And just moving on to his the insignia on his chest there, just giving it a bit of a three-dimensional quality to it. And then just laying in some of the muscles there, going a little heavier in the thicker areas of the muscle and away from the light source. You can see I jump around a bit on the figure. I'll draw one knee and then I'll move up to his chest and I'll draw bits there, and I'm always sort of constantly looking at the figure and sort of adding bits when I notice something. Okay, I need to add a little bit more there and a little bit more here, so I tend to jump around a bit. Just going very lightly in there with doing some of the creasing around his leg and hip area. Now just fleshing out some of the muscles around his rib cage. Sort of going a bit heavier on the other side that's closer to the shadow area. Again, jumping around now down to his kneecap. Just putting in the muscles of his legs. You don't have to accentuate every single side of the muscle. If you do the top and the bottom, obviously you want to vary the line weights that you've got there. Otherwise it's going to look really sort of rigid and sort of too uniform, and it's not the way it appears sort of on the body. That you sort of want to hint at the muscles and not be too specific with all the outlines. Okay, now just jumping up to his forearms, just adding the details to these forearm guards that he's got on his arms. I don't know why Colossus has got these sort of arm guards on him when he's got metallic skin. It's not like he really needs the protection on his arms, but yeah, just adding the details there. I guess they're there for decoration. Adding some details to the muscles, and now just going to draw in here the fingers and everything with the ink. I haven't actually penciled any of the fingers in, so I'm just sort of drawing them in now with the ink for his fist. And just jumping around to the other arm, drawing the other details on his hand as he's grabbing this metal object here. Bit more crumpling again, just going a little lighter as it recedes into the background. And sort of drawing the outline there on the other side of his leg of the metal object that he's grabbed. Now here I'm just adding a bit of texture to the metal object, again just to separate the planes, just sort of dirtying it up a bit, doing some cross hatching and some dots and other bits of debris here on the arm. Basically just to help to separate the planes. I've got these bold sort of dark shadowy areas in the foreground, and Colossus sort of got more of a clear outline sort of happening. So just adding a bit of texture to show that it's behind Colossus. Back with the brush now, just adding some of the larger, darker, heavier sort of lines, shadowy areas and reflections sort of on his armor here. Now, as I did in the top panel there, I was using just the 0.35 to add these shadow areas, but this way I'm not actually paying attention too much to the lines. I'm just adding in the shadow areas, and then just drawing the lines over the top. And I'll show you later how I sort of add the white gaps to them. Just with the crocodile now, just adding the lines because they're a bit more of a uniform sort of look to them, so I don't want to use the brush. Just wanting some blacks on his head. And just adding a bit more weight to some of the shadow areas and reflections sort of happening on his face there, just to give it a bit more depth. Again, just drawing over the lines with sort of the metallic rendering that I'm doing there. And again, just adding more reflections and shadows to the other arm. Okay, just back with the crocodile now. Adding a few more of those banding lines on his shoulder there. Just sort of, you can see me sort of defining the form with them. And again on the other arm, same sort of thing. Just sort of changing direction with the lines, sort of indicate which way his arm's going. Just double checking how Colossus's fingers go. I think they've been drawn several ways over the years, so I'm just going with this version that I'm drawing here. Adding a bit more detail with some of the banding going around his fingers. Again, sort of indicates the direction that the digits are going in. And just adding some detail here to his other hand too. Decided to just keep going with the crocal here to add the shadows and reflections to the bits of skin, just adding a bit of more detail to his reflections on his skin on his arm there, as well as on his face. Just adding some stuff to his mouth, and again more of the reflections and stuff, just adding a bit more shadows and things. Again, these sort of larger areas, back to the brush again. And just adding some shadows to the darker parts of his costume here. Putting his abs in. Just being careful not to go over the piping there of his costume. And just laying in flat areas of black, not really adding any cross-hatching or anything. Just sort of, you see me flicking across to look at the computer screen that I'm referencing, just to make sure I'm I've got the right parts, which are the dark parts of his costume. And just spotting a few blacks on his leg as well. Not too many, because obviously on that side they're going to be in the light source. But just on the underside of his knee here, sort of adding some darker areas. Just on the other side of the other leg as well. Just so you can see me adding sort of these thicker lines where the shadow areas are. Just a bit of a highlight on his knee. Some creasing, and then some shadows on his foot as well. Again, just adding some more texture to this foreground here. Just give it a bit of a different look to the things sort of closest to them, and separate the planes again. Just with the brush, adding some varying line weights to show all these ripped parts of the metal. Obviously going heavier on the sides, which is the undersides, which are away from the light source again.